Funny enough about Laura Bailey, there's this old anime that I never heard of. All of a sudden, I started getting clips called Koachan or something like that. And there's the reason why it started popping up is the main character, I'm assuming it is, does raps. Like it's translated from English and from Japanese to English, obviously, and they got to make it work with the voices and the sync ups and make it rhyme.
They got to match it to music.
Yeah, and it's not like it's like a goofy rap. It's not trying to be like the ones you would think of. So it's not like not taking itself too seriously. And something that like I listened to a couple of them because the performance was like really good, and I was like, damn, this is really entertaining. This actress is doing a lot with it. Now I have this own viewpoint of mine that I
here we go
formed through like going to anime. This is only for anime, by the way.
Brace yourself, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, where I go back and me and a friend went and looked at old anime and new anime, right? And when I say old anime, not even entirely old, like cut off, I would say like early 2010s. But I formed the opinion of that acting in the anime space got worse, primarily because it blew up a lot more. And whereas before you had a lot more of this, it was a nicher space, and the voice actors in that space like kind of dominated it. You saw a lot of the same voice actors, and they were good at their performances. And now that you have a lot more, I feel like the quality at the same time has dropped because, again,
there's less gatekeepers, is what you're saying? Or?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know why exactly, but obviously, I was going to these old anime to be like, okay, this sounds just better to me. And this was one of those cases where I was thinking that, and I was like, damn, she's doing like really good because this is something that really could come across as cringy. It could come across as it was wonky. These rap segments.
Yeah,
and I was like, this voice actress is really good. Who is it?
Laura
Bailey.
Oh, Laura Bailey.
14 years old. And
wow.
I was like, she was doing amazing. Jesus Christ, no wonder she's good. She was good at the gate. She was talented.
She's my favorite.
Yeah.
I love her.
Like I said, she made these raps that could have been horrible, really entertaining and charming. And she's been killing it ever since, apparently. But that was just a funny little like moment I had of just like, damn, voice actors are good.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes they're not.
Like anything. Well, that's crazy. Sometimes you act bad.
I remember the last time I heard a voice actor and I was like, oof, you are not doing this well. Like,
are you trying to think of something?
I mean, I guess there's like, I just named a couple with like some of the Assassin's Creed stuff, and I gotta ask, like, is it because, do you think the voice acting has downgraded because, like, is it just because you're just watching more new stuff and like old stuff you're only watching the good stuff? You know what I mean?
That's possible. That's definitely possible because there's still, of course, good anime in dub.
Because we're gonna, unless it's like iconically bad, and this goes across all mediums of art or whatever, right? Unless it's like iconically bad, like if you're underwhelming to like poor or whatever, like you're gonna be forgotten to time.
And the argument I would say against that is the way I found out is I didn't go to like the best anime. I went to a site which has a randomizer and it just chooses something, whatever. And sometimes these things could be the weirdest, wackiest fucking things. And even ones that were
the way you spend your free time is insane.
This was a long while ago. And it was like I was hanging out with a friend and we had that conversation and we were like, let's put it to the test. Let's actually, because we had that same opinion already, but it's like, that's our perspective growing up on those anime.
Sure.
And then, these new ones aren't so good. Not back in my day. But the randomizer, even with not good quality anime, the voice acting was still like a lot of effort put into it comparative to now where there's tons of good voice actors. And even in animes that overall don't have good ones, but there's also chunks of people like just.
Well, my next question is like if they're producing more anime series now than ever before.
Yeah.
There can only be so many greats.
That's
what I'm saying?
That is true. But this even extends to some of the big like anime, like the high budget, high quality ones. But again, that does still make sense that at the when you look at it from a broader perspective, it could be just the ones that stick in your mind are the high quality shows, and so you filter out all of the ones that would have bad voice acting in it from those old days. But that's just my perspective on it. Because it's weird because I only say it for that specifically because video games have never had that problem, regardless of whether they're being adapted from a Japanese video game or a fucking Russian video game or whatever. Voice acting just was more consistently good in the video game space, or at least the same consistent level of quality.
Why do you think Nintendo never really like dove deep into voice acting?
I think it's because they make the cheaper games, and
I don't know if they make the cheaper games.
No, I mean, they're not
You
as
know,
like
tell
high
me,
advanced.
like Legend of Zelda is expensive.
But comparative to like everything else in that space at the moment, like the other big AAA games, because Nintendo always has that AAA space.
Yeah.
They're always in that AAA space, but it's never the same level as, a lot of Western studios. But yeah, I don't know, because they've clearly kind of shifted away from that now. They're doing more voice acting. Legend of Zelda, for example. Link's still quiet, but Zelda started talking. Other characters had voices as well.
Yeah, I guess. I just found it weird because, we're playing Breath of the Wild for the game club. You got 2 weeks to play it, everybody. And, you get to the Zora Kingdom. Zora's?
Yep.
Yeah, you get to the Zora Kingdom, and the prince there is a big character in that thing. He's introduced in a cutscene where he is voiced, and then they just go to the classic, huh!
Yeah.
Like, just to kind of like give you tone. And then it's just text boxes for the rest of it. So I as I was playing, I was like, why the fuck did they have this big introductory cutscene with a voiced line and then he doesn't have a voice?
It could be because nobody seems to really care. Like, no one says, this Legends of Zelda game doesn't have voice acting still. People were just like, yeah, that's how Legends of Zelda plays. You have text bubbles. And
Sure.
they leaned a bit into that direction, but they were like, why do we need to spend time on...
Did Tears of the Kingdom have more voice lines or about the same?
I feel like it had to have. Like, my experience is it did.
Because Tears of the Kingdom is more narrative focused than Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
And then in my head, those characters are talking, but I don't know if
it's hard to...
I don't know if I supplied the voice myself or if, that's kind of the tricky thing with like unvoiced stuff.
And that's one of the benefits, really. Like, they don't have to do entirely voice acted, and we kind of can't even really remember. We don't care.
Would you rather, Connor, the mix of some of it's voiced, some of it's not, you got to text bubbles and read it or whatever, or would you rather just full-blown only voice acting and full-blown only text? I think I would rather just pick one. I don't think I liked the mix. I don't think I like the mix. I think the mix throws me off.
Yeah, I get that. I just like the mix because very often I don't need to hear the character constantly talk out. Like, for example, Persona series. Like, there's a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
And I listen to all of it when it happens. So it's kind of nice when there's not voice acting so I can get through it quicker because there's so much dialogue.
Right.
And so I think the melding can very often help, especially with Legends of Zelda, because I do have voices for things like Zelda, but like you, I can't definitively say, oh, it had voice acting in those parts or in most of the parts of the game. It all just melds together at a certain point.
I just feel like when a game mixes it, when the voice is not, when the text is not voiced, it muddles the character. And what I mean by that is, in a game like Final Fantasy VII, right, where there's no voice acting in it, it's all text, right? I'm able to create the voices of those characters myself. And so, through the work of really well-written characters, and my own imagination, the combination of those things is able to create a fully formed character in my brain. But then when I go to like a Yakuza, and the character is voiced, it's less than half, really.
It is,
with all the extra,
most.
maybe 40% of the time. He's really strongly identified in the voiced segments, but then when we get to the non-voiced segments, I feel like my brain putting a voice on it and the dialogue in that creates a different character. So then the overall character gets muddied as to who he really is. You know what I'm saying?
I get entirely what you're saying, and I feel like in some cases that would definitely happen. I would say Yakuza is a good example where it kind of does happen.
Yeah, like when we get to the lower budget cutscenes of Yakuza, like Kiryu becomes less of a character.
But the melding of those two things at the same time, I can do it on my own, which is why I'm completely fine with just having text bubbles, because I will think of something for them to sound like, to differentiate them. But at the same time, if you have a voice actor perform and then you switch over to text bubbles, I start reading it in their voice and thinking it how they would say it. I don't all of a sudden divert back to how I would think they'd sound. So, I just don't really see...
I think my brain just automatically, separates the two.
Yeah, it does.
And it might be a me problem, right? It might be, but,
there are people who don't do what we just said we do, of differentiating between voice characters. Some people just read the text and that's it,
Fair. Yeah.
Very much different.
Oh, I had another point. Oh, also, if it's voiced versus not voiced, I think the brain automatically puts more priority on the voiced stuff. Just because of human nature and how human brains work. And so, there's a part of me that my focus kind of turns off a little bit when a text-based conversation happens. Whether it's Persona or Yakuza or anything that I like love, you know, sometimes I just go, this part's not important. I just start mashing X. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I like it. I guess I would say, because I haven't really thought about this, to be honest. I just like it being all sorts of things. You know, whether it's entirely speech, whether it's entirely text bubbles.
Well, let's be honest. The reason that it's mixed is because they don't have budget to voice all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You know,
and that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't necessarily prefer, people pick a path, voice acting or none, because it allows them to, not only employ voice actors, but also cut down on what usually would be a lot more costly if you were to only use voice actors in every single dialogue moment, because you'd have to just, there's a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah, I guess, but it's just like in games where it's only text, I just find myself paying attention to all of the text a lot better.
I mean, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I end up paying attention to it regardless, but definitely when I love reading a lot because I can just read for a long, long time. I just get into it. So it does do that as well, but I never feel a negative effect from having the melding of voice acting and those text bubbles. I just naturally go, okay, they're talking now.
Claire Obscure Expedition 33, they've said that's a fully voiced game, right?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
I feel like they said that.
They've worked on it for how many years now? It's been
a couple years.
Development for a while.
Yeah, I think 4.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we knew about it until max 2 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
I just felt like it was like 2018 or some ridiculous thing like that because they were needing funding. Maybe I'm confusing it with something else I saw.
Couldn't tell you.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like, do you think the industry is going to a point where they're moving towards either type of, way to do dialogue?
No.
Voice or not? Yeah, neither do I.
No.
I feel like it's just kind of whatever the developer sees fits their needs at the moment.
That's really what it is.
Yeah.
If anything, like I could see like the text-based stuff going away. But there's always, games that are made on the cheaper side or games that like are massive and have a bunch of different game modes like a Yakuza or something where like you just I don't need Kiryu to voice all the different mini game situations that happen in a Yakuza game. Like I just don't need that. That doesn't but at the same time, I would like it if we just chose one path or the other, because it just
and with a game like
there's just a part of me that just turns off a little bit when we switch.
It's maybe less acceptable with something like Yakuza because they have great performances, but they just don't talk sometimes. And you have a big budget. You're Sega. It's one of the biggest franchise you got right now. By the time Yakuza 0 came
a lot of those games, like when Yakuza 0 is the one that exploded it in the West. Now it was always big in Japan, but like you can't just be big in Japan and pay your voice actors for how big those games are and how deep a lot of those scenarios end up, right? Like it's just not possible. So you just have to prioritize what's important. Right? But if it was like, I think it'd be like more forgivable to me if it was like all the story missions are voiced. But that's not the case in Yakuza.
Yeah,
like it will from cutscene to cutscene be a different style of thing. I think that's changed a little bit in the more recent years. But I think that's just because they've had more budget, but it's still there. Like there's still a lot of conversations that happen purely in text. Usually it's not so much because in Yakuza 0 they go from like full-blown 3D motion animated FMV cutscenes to like literally here's a JPEG of the character. And this is like a main story mission cutscene that's happening, right? That's how it used to be. Now it's like all the like cutscenes are voiced, but when they go into like there's that debrief segment after a cutscene where they go, oh man, why did you do that thing that you just did? That's usually not voiced, but that's usually in the game engine world.
Yeah.
The characters are all standing around like they would stand around while you're playing the game. I don't know. It's a thought for me. I just personally would rather they pick one or the other.
Would you say that's a problem with like Fire Emblem Three Houses, which also does that?
Yeah.
You think it's a problem with it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are character bonding conversations, because those aren't voiced, that I get to the end of and I go, what the fuck happened in that scene? Like I don't know. I wasn't paying attention.
They aren't voiced?
Huh?
Aren't they voiced?
No. So like the first one and I think the last one are voiced, but all the middle stuff.
Oh, that's what. Yeah.
The ones where like character development doesn't happen. It's just like characters interacting. Like the one who eats is like talking about his favorite foods or whatever, and is like eating the other character's lunch by accident, like those are the ones that are not voiced.
Okay.
It'll be like, huh? like that type of shit. But it won't be like a
Nice.
conversation. Yeah, literally nice. Yeah, like, and that's the most you'll get.
I'll drink to that.
And it won't even be what they're saying. Like it'll literally be, I'll drink to that, and the text will say, "Hey, I'm really glad you're my friend." Like,
which with the amount of dialogue in a game like Fire Emblem Three Houses,
totally understandable.
sense.
There's so much dialogue in that game, you know.
Which I guess you could say the same for Yakuza. There's just a lot of shit you.
But again,
do.
like, pick or like reserve the voice acting for important things. You know, I understand you have the budget to keep going and do more, but then doing more confuses me.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. So definitely a me problem though.
Yeah, like I was saying before, everyone kind of I think interprets this thing very differently,
Sure.
which is why you don't see a lot of like coalescing of these groups of people who are like everything should be voiced. No, it should be in text bubbles. Why can't we have both? You know, there's.
I mean, I'm fine with the text bubbles. I'm fine with voice acting. Like, I'm cool with either way. It's just when you mix them, to me, I go, ugh. Like, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like,
I
was jumping back to Final Fantasy VII, and I was gonna go the remake games, but they voice everything in that. Crisis Core. You know, Crisis Core, another example of like, I'm only paying attention when the voices are happening, and because I'm not paying attention when the voices aren't happening, and that game is also just not well written, you know, it's a lot of confusing games. Why did he eat the hair? You know, why? Why did that happen?
Because he gave him powers.
But it wasn't even the main bad guy. It was just like a goon.
Give him powers. Like you said, that game's not very well written.
That game's not very good
at all.
Fun to play.
It's good. Yeah, very fun to play.
Fun to play.
Fun to play.